I'd like to introduce Veronica Mwangi, who is our first panelist. She will be talking to us today about the invisible children, with specific reference to the intersex children and the findings of the Kenyan Intersex Task Force and the advocacy and the outcomes. So basically, we are focusing on, her presentation will be on, advocacy as a strategy for inclusion of children who are almost always overlooked. Ms. Veronica Mwangi is a Kenyan advocate with over 12 years specialized experience in human rights, family, civil, and commercial law. She holds a master's degree in business administration, strategic management option. She's a child rights advocate, certified professional mediator, an accredited court-annexed mediator, a trainer of trainees in various human rights thematic topics. Her work experience ranges from court litigation on child rights, human rights practice, mediation, public policy, and governance matters. She continues to coordinate Kenya's institutional reforms, advocacy on intersex persons' rights, and migration and human rights. She has served the country in various task forces and advisory committees, notably the National Council for the Administration of Justice, NCAJ, Special Task Force on Children Matters, National Advisory Committees on Counter Trafficking in Persons, the Intersex Persons Implementation Committee, and now the defunct Intersex Task Force. Currently, she is Deputy Director in the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, leading the Reforms and Accountability Department, which focuses on institutional reforms, advocacy towards infusing a culture of respect for human rights. Veronica, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sheila, and thank you for everyone and our listeners. Also, thank you for this particular opportunity. I would want to first and foremost, of course, acknowledge the opportunity given. And with that, I will go directly to the message of today, or the topic of today, children's rights as human rights. From my understanding of this particular topic, I decided to look at it and give it a title that will also communicate to the intention of the call today. And I will be looking at children's rights as human rights, lifting the veil of the invisible children, a case study of the intersex children in Kenya. Free Dictionary, which speaks to lifting of divulge to explain or reveal something that was previously a secret. In other countries in the world, intersex persons have been forced to live their lives in secrecy. I will go into a case of Mary Waithera, who is also known as James Karanja, the societal stigma and repercussions. His was a secret life at the behest of the society and all it stands for. Far off, but still within the African continent, we meet Mfaso from Zambia, who again was born an intersex person, raised as a girl, but eventually had to come to terms with his new reality. And on 17th April 2019, that is last year, he was able to open up to BBC about his being intersex. And in his interview, he stated that he had been forced to live a secret life because he could not bear the stigma that is faced by intersex persons in Africa. Many miles away in USA, we have the Human Rights Report that has reported about medically unnecessary surgeries of intersex persons or intersex children in the US. Of interest for me is a case of a 60-year-old intersex woman in New York who was interviewed, and in addressing the silent rule of non-disclosure of intersex person, she gave an ordeal as follows. She says, my parents, the doctors did not tell my parents. My parents did not know that they had deemed me a pseudo-hermaphrodite. My mother was kept under sedation for 3 days when I was born, until they could tell her what I was. They just didn't want her to wake up and she was going to say it is a girl or a boy. Or she was going to say, is it a girl or a boy? That's what it was. If they couldn't tell the mother what sex her kid was, they kept her under for a while. This again clearly stipulates that the silence and the secrecy that comes about, that surrounds the lives of intersex people, intersex children, globally seems to really manifest and indicate that there is need for us to do a lot of work in this, a lot of work to ensure that the voices of these vulnerable group of people is brought forth. And with this, we need to ensure that parents and guardians of intersex persons, oftentimes at the point of giving birth to an intersex child, they are faced with a lot of challenges that leave them lonely, confused, and also mentally destabilized. So I would go into who is an intersex person. I know most people would want to ask that question. Intersex person refers to a child born with unclear sex characteristics that includes ambiguous male and female genitalia, hormones, chromosomes, and gonads. This then makes it difficult for this child to fit in the current atypical male or female binary models that we have really adopted in the different registration systems. In the past, most people used to refer to intersex persons as hermaphrodites. This term is derogatory. Hence, the use of the new term intersex persons, which comes in to help us and to help every other person to communicate the need to uphold the human dignity of the intersex person. If you speak to the doctors, they will tell you about intersex condition, which again is a medical condition that affects the biology sex of a person. There are over 46 intersex variations. And according to one doctor, Dr. Ngatia, he says hormones are not assigned, they assign themselves. So why should we speak about intersex children? Are they different? Why not just go in and say and talk about intersex persons? Again, this is a question of children's rights as human rights. Just to reiterate that human rights are entitlements to every human being, and children in their own right are human beings, and so they have rights. The terminology that is used to refer to children's rights, it's only used to specify set of human rights that are specifically adapted to children's vulnerability, their specific age, and their specific needs and age appropriate. This again is to ensure that we safeguard their development as children. In Kenya, what have we done with regard to advocating or advancing the rights of intersex persons? There's a lot that has been done. First and foremost, I would go into the foundation. What was the basis of the government of Kenya putting in place a task force to advocate for the rights of intersex persons? This was really, it is a journey that the intersex persons have really walked, starting from legal battles, cases that were taken into court. All these cases, again, they were founded on the principles of the Constitution. That is the supremacy of the Constitution, where we go back and, of course, currently we look at, currently in Kenya, we look at the Constitution of Kenya, 2010, which really has provided a comprehensive and modern Bill of Rights that envisions a human rights-based and social justice-oriented state and society. In this regard, I would want to really reiterate that all stakeholders, state and non-state actors, everyone in the society has the ability and has the obligation to safeguard the rights of intersex persons, intersex children to be precise. Article 10(2)(b) of the Kenyan Constitution speaks about the national values and principles of governance that should guide us. Some of these principles include human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusiveness, among others. So allow me to go into just a bit of statistics about intersex persons. Globally, it is estimated that 0.05 to 1.7% of newborn babies are intersex. These are statistics that have been documented, also have been confirmed by UN Free and Equal campaign, a campaign that was initiated by the UN Office for Human Rights. Again, here in Kenya, we have Child Rights International Network that stated in court that they have documented estimates of 20,000 Kenyans who are born alive as intersex persons. Also, this is not forgetting the statistics that we have as Kenya. Recently, that is last year in August, Kenya was able to undertake a population census where 1,524 intersex persons were registered. Again, these numbers, 1,524, if you look at them and estimate them against the population, then we have 0.03. Does this mean 1,524 are the total intersex persons we have in Kenya? Not really. This is just indicative because these were the few people who are able to come out and to fight the stigma, and they got to be enumerated. So the journey about intersex persons advocacy in Kenya began in 2007, where the High Court was approached with regard to a case about an inmate, RM case, who was detained. The inmate was intersex person. The inmate underwent a number of violations, including discrimination, and so the court came in to really intervene, and the court was able even to uphold that this particular inmate was violated. So that is between 2007 and 2010. Then again in 2010, what happened? There was the process of enacting a Persons Deprived of Liberty Act, which in Kenya, it is the only law that has specifically addressed the issues of intersex persons with regard to even making an attempt to define who an intersex person is. Again in 2013, the court again got to sit and determine a case where a baby, the case is referenced as Baby A case. Baby A case refers to a child who was born intersex but could not access the legal documents that is required. The reasons being the sex marker concerns became apparent. And as such, within that Baby A's case, the court then gave directions that there was need for the AG to establish the plight of intersex persons and to be precise to identify the numbers of intersex persons across Kenya and the challenges they were facing with regard to care, protection, and management. And as such, that is how the Intersex Persons Task Force was formed in May 2017. It operated between May 2017 and March 2019. And during this time, a nationwide survey was done. And with this national survey, a report with key recommendations was submitted to the Attorney General in March 2019. And upon receiving this particular report, the Attorney General proceeded to form what we call an intersex persons implementation and coordination committee, which still is currently undertaking the implementation of these recommendations. Then on the other side, in August 2019, Kenya was able to at least get to document and enumerate the intersex persons in the National Population Housing Census. This being a first in the regional level, but also globally. And going on, I would want to speak to what were the specific things that the task force addressed in terms of the findings. The task force in its working was able to observe the following. One, the task force in its research and literature noted that most countries lack comprehensive data on intersex persons, including Kenya. And the population census documentation, or the population census enumeration of the 1,524 intersex persons was a step in the right direction. This happened after. But nevertheless, it was also observed that many countries have not put in place concrete policy, legislative and institutional or administrative system or structures that safeguard the rights of the intersex person. The task force also observed that 46 intersex conditions, the variations that I have alluded to, can be manifest at different stages. That is during pregnancy, screening, at birth, in childhood, and also during puberty and adulthood. Again, this is just to let us know that intersex process, even just the recognition of intersex person and status is not an event. It is a process. It's a journey that can occur at any stage of life. And in this regard, the Intersex was able to propose a comprehensive definition of who an intersex person should be. And in my notes, I have that. I would be sharing the notes with Dr. Sheila for anyone who would be interested. But then the definition here speaks about intersex person as a person who is conceived and born with a biological sex characteristic that cannot be exclusively categorized in the common binary male or female due to their inherent and mixed anatomical, hormonal, gonadal, and chromosomal patterns, which could occur or which could be apparent prior to or at birth, in childhood, puberty, or adulthood. So delving further into the findings, I will just highlight the finding. The task force was able to find that most of the intersex persons suffer serious discrimination and systemic human rights violations due to the gaps that we have in our laws. It was observed that despite the Constitution of Kenya, Articles 2, Articles 19, 27, and many others recognizing and protecting intersex persons, the sectoral laws that we have that have been able to really institutionalize and operationalize some of these services and systems have a lot of gaps. And this is because these systems are fashioned along binary concepts of male and female. The sectors that are mostly affected are the sector of the registration of persons. That is where you have the births and death certificates being issued. Health sector, again, education, employment sector is also affected. Civil registrations, where you have the national identity cards issuance, social protection services, immigration, as well as access to justice. The other challenge that was observed, the other finding that was noted is that intersex person status, when an intersex person or a parent gets to know or becomes aware of the intersex person status, oftentimes they face a lot of confusion and emotional drain that really affects them from that point going onward. And oftentimes you have intersex persons who are living or who have been socialized in different ways because of the skewed choices that were made by the parents, the guardians, and the birth attendants at the point of birth. Or the other side is, with regard to access to healthcare, a total of 54% of the intersex persons indicated or ranked access to healthcare as poor. This is because these health facilities are again influenced by the prevailing biases and prejudices. The other one is on issues of the challenge on access to education. 57% of the intersex persons indicated that they have had problems accessing education. So they rated access to education as poor. And this again was because these systems again are built on prejudices in policies, laws, and systems. And I would just give a case here as we end. So this particular case here showcases the ignorance among caregivers in school environment and how this impacts on intersex children access to education, but also their human dignity. So this is a parent of intersex child says that she gave birth to this child and raised this child as a girl. But when this child reached puberty, this child became aware of her condition, and this affected her performance in secondary school. The head teacher of that particular school angrily called this parent and demanded that she withdraws her child from that school before she spreads her ujinga. That in English is to speak to stupidity to other students. So you can see here a caregiver in a school, someone we are supposed to trust in the system, in the process, to mold and to protect and safeguard this child, being the one who is perpetuating a violence or a violation. On the other side, a simple question that you ask any parent about choosing a school type for your child, most parents will say it's a simple arithmetic. But for an intersex parent, choosing or making a choice about which school your intersex child will join, is it a girls' boarding school or a boys' boarding school? Is it a day school or not? it's a mentally draining process. Ask an intersex person this question, and I can assure you they'll give you a number of considerations that they must put in place to ensure safety, but also welfare of that particular child, because every minute counts. The other few challenges that we came across was the lack of important registration documents among the intersex person. Again, this has also affected their access to education, employment, and even actualizing some of their rights. As simple as some of their rights, some of the intersex persons alluded to the fact that they are not even able to engage in mobile banking and even simple mobile money transfer processes like M-Pesa, among others, just because they don't have proper identification documents. And even those who have identification documents, oftentimes those documents do not represent their right sex. So you get people going and walking around with documentations, but in reality, those documentations are already contradicting and perpetuating a conflict of law. And most of them have either have in one way or the other been arrested for impersonation, among other crimes. So with regard to access to registration of persons, access to justice, intersex persons really noted, or they indicated that they have had a violation of their privacy due to intrusive and unnecessary searches. And the last one, with regard to suffering discrimination, intersex persons continue to suffer stigma perpetuated by the society due to the different customary practices, religious and professional beliefs and practices that we have, which again are built in the systems that are prejudiced. In terms of recommendations, what did we recommend? The issue of recognition and the access to legal document was highlighted, and the legislature was directed to facilitate recognition of intersex persons in law. Currently, the Intersex Implementation Coordination Committee is working with the Senate and the different National Assembly members to ensure that we actualize the inclusion of intersex marker in our laws, as this will really make it very easy for a mother who is today giving birth to a child who is intersex to not worry, to not go around thinking through what is the right choice they should make, after which years later they'll come and regret the choice they made for their children. And again, this intersex marker and the legal documentation will really help us to stop the unnecessary medical interventions that continue to come in, because these medical interventions, again, they bring in violations and so on. So in terms of the documentation, there is need to also lobby, and we are advocating for the inclusion of intersex marker in the different legal documents that we have. And also, with regard to public health, there is, I'm finalizing, with regard to public health, there is need for the Ministry of Health and the different actors to come in and join hands and ensure that we develop care, treatment and protection guidelines and protocols, and ensure that also intersex persons are able to access medical cover. Simple as the national NHIF, the National Health Insurance Fund, majority are out of it because of lack of documentation. Then the last one is about the medical interventions, the need for us to really have proper protocols that will guard against unnecessary interventions upon intersex children. The last one is the equalization fund, where intersex persons should be taken care of with regard to just coming in to bring equity and ensure that they are included in the process. Am I done? My time is over?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Veronica. That was fascinating, because when we talk about intersex children, they're truly invisible. They don't have an identity at birth. They are assigned the wrong identity. They grow up with a lot of discrimination. Basic services are not availed to them. So I'm sure our viewers may have a lot of questions for you, and we will ask the question at the end during the Q&A. So thank you very much for that. I think what really stood out for me is the silence and secrecy that surrounds the intersex globally and in Kenya, and also the ignorance even within our education systems that continue to discriminate and exclude them. from enjoying their rights as children and as human beings.